Morning, everybody. Our listeners, Steve, and everyone. What a delightful gathering this is. It's not the usual way I have breakfast. This is magnificent. Breakfast with learning, and a huge shakar to this community for everything you're doing. And this particular concept is a really lovely one, and a huge shakar to you all for responding to the invitation and for making this something very special. And yes, Stephen's right. I was committed already 2 years ago or so. Then COVID came along, and but here we are, Baruch Hashem, and a huge shkach to you, Stephen, for this initiative and for everything you're doing. So let me pose a question relating to a pasuk from Parshat Balak, where the prophet Bil'am, who intended to issue curses, ends up giving a bracha to our people. En am levadad yishkon uvagoyim lo yitchashav. I think we can identify strongly with these words. En am levadad yishkon. Behold, you are a people that dwells alone. Uvagoyim lo yitchashav, not numbered amongst the nations. And indeed, through history, there have been many, many occasions in which this has been an accurate description of the fate of the Jewish people. But the question, obviously, is, this is a klala, it's not a bracha. So did Bilam slip this one in with Hashem not noticing, with Hashem not changing his word? There's something wrong here. So where is there bracha in these words? And I strongly believe, in the context of what our faith teaches us, that within all negatives, there are positives. And certainly within this statement of Bilam, within the unfortunate circumstances that often face our people, actually, there is a tremendous silver lining. The best way I can explain it is through understanding entry points. Now, what do I mean by entry points? Let me tell you about a meeting I had 7 years ago. There was a man called Maccabee Caruso who wrote to my office saying he was coming from Israel and he was requesting a meeting with the chief rabbi. And I'm blessed because I'm busy. Being busy is a great blessing. And unfortunately, I can't see all the people who want to see me. So my office responded to this man and said, could you please tell us what it is you want to see the chief rabbi about? And he said, it's about the Maccabea. By the way, you know that today the Maccabea Games are starting in Israel. It's the second largest sporting event in the world. Over 10,000 sportsmen and women from 80 countries playing in 40 sports. So this was 1 year after the Maccabea of 8 years ago. So he said, I want to speak to the chief rabbi of the Maccabea. So my office replied saying, we're so sorry, but the chief rabbi is exceptionally busy, etc. I then get a call from one of the heads of Maccabi GB who said, Chief Rabbi, please do me a personal favor and see this man. It'll only be half an hour. Okay, so I did the personal favor. It turned out to be one of the most worthwhile half hours I've had. That's quite a statement. What was it all about? So here there was this elderly man, must have been about 80 years old. He had come from South America, had made Aliyah, and he was a very successful businessman in Israel. And he had always asked himself, why had his parents called him Maccabee? What's it got to do with anything? And then it so happened that the Maccabea had taken place the year before, so he went to see some of the sports events. Well, his name was Maccabee. And then he read a statistic in an Israeli newspaper which stated 27% of the participants in the Maccabea make Aliyah within 10 years. So he then started to inquire, well, which are the countries which send delegations? And he came to see me in my capacity as Chief Rabbi of the Commonwealth to give me a list of all Commonwealth Jewish communities which do not send a delegation to the Maccabea, saying, Chief Rabbi, you have to get them there because this will strengthen their Yiddishkeit. So Maccabee Caruso was able to remind me of the importance of entry points. Now, We have lots of entry points. The most important entry point is the Jewish home. A baby enters into that environment, and that will always be the strongest and most significant influence upon Jewish people. Shuls are entry points, schools are entry points, youth movements are entry points, but there are some hidden entry points. One of them is Jewish sport. When Jewish people play sport within a Jewish team, the Jewish club, it strengthens their Jewish awareness and their Jewish identity. Baruch Hashem, Medinat Yisrael, in addition to being the greatest blessing Hashem has given to Am Yisrael in the past 2 millennia, it is also a major entry point for people who make Aliyah, for people who visit. It strengthens our Jewish identity. And the Maccabiah, therefore, is a double entry point. It's Jewish sport within the Jewish state. Now, why am I telling you all of this? And that is because, unfortunately, for sad reasons, anti-Semitism is a good entry point. There are some people whose connection to Judaism is because of anti-Semitism. A few years ago, I went on March of the Living. I have visited concentration camps many times. It's something I emotionally try to keep away from because I had members of my family who perished in the Shoah. But sometimes I force myself to do it, and this was one occasion why. There were 280 participants from the UK, the vast majority of whom were university students whom we never see in our shuls. So they were connecting with Yiddishkeit through Jewish suffering. I remember when I was rabbi at Marvel Arts Shul, we had an Israeli shomer whose name was Yuval. And for 2 years, he would stand outside the building and I would see him when I was coming in. I was leaving, a lovely, lovely fellow. But I would never see him inside the building. Well, his job was to be outside. And after 2 years, it was a mincha one afternoon, Yuval walked in. It wasn't his shift, he came inside. He said, Rabbi, can you please show me where we are, what page? So I showed him and I was thinking to myself, oh, he's obviously going to say Kaddish, but he didn't say Kaddish. And I came up to him at the end of the service, I said, Yuval, so nice to see you, any special reason? He said, I'll tell you what it is, Rabbi, for 2 years, I've seen people coming into the building with smiles on their faces, and they leave with smiles on their faces. I wanted to discover what it was that they were experiencing. And there are over 4,000 CST volunteers in this country who stand outside buildings. And I have no doubt that quite a number of them from standing outside eventually come inside. It is an entry point. On Hanukkah every year, I light many Hanukkah candles. There are all types of events. And one of the events is the lighting of the Chanukiah in Speaker's house in the Palace of Westminster. And it's a beautiful event. Basically, the Speaker of the House of Commons invites all the Jewish MPs and peers to come to Hanukkah lighting. Did you know there are 81 Jewish MPs? Sorry, not MPs, peers. Yes, 10% of the members of the House of Lords are Jewish. So these events, in my first years as Chief Rabbi, I wouldn't call them nebuchi events, but they were shvach. Okay, great location, wonderful venue, wonderful ambience, shvach. During the last 2 years before COVID, huge attendances. And there's one person to thank, Jeremy Corbyn. There were so many Labour peers and MPs who came to this lighting of the Chanukiah. There was one who's a household name, a Labour member of Parliament, who very emotionally came and said to me, Chief Rabbi, this is the first Jewish religious ceremony I'm attending in 40 years. But that person could sing Ma'os Sur Bahat. Anti-Semitism connects people. Not that we want it, not that we celebrate it, chas v'shalom, but it is an entry point. And we particularly now, as we're emerging from the pandemic, need to highlight entry points, to take advantage of them, and to create further ones, mitoch shelo lishma yavo lishma, so that people will come in through Jewish places, will connect with the Yiddishkeit. But there is a further dimension to the prophecy of Bilam. Rashi reads positive elements in the prophecy of Bilam. Rashi says in the final reckoning, at the end of days, when other nations are judged very severely by Hashem, we won't be numbered in their midst. Hashem will judge us favorably. Or Rashi says, when it comes to the simcha of Am Yisrael, we will be able to experience that by ourselves, won't be diluted by others. But many other Mefarshim explain as follows, that actually, for the sake of the world, it is important for Jewish people to have an exclusivist ideology, for us to be amongst Unzera, amongst ourselves, in order that we should be a strong, committed entity so that we can convey our values to the environment around us and be a veritable light unto the nations. This is a message I give to every Secretary of State for Education. So whenever a new Secretary of State for Education is appointed, within a few weeks, I make a point to see him or her. And I've been to see many Secretaries of State for Education. In fact, my office was trying to make an appointment last week, but the lady lasted for 36 hours. So we'll be making an appointment soon for the latest one. And I always give the same message, and that is, we need to have immersive Jewish education, strong state schools for Jewish faith, in order that as proud Jews, we will be outstanding members of society. We believe in integration and not assimilation. So our purpose is to integrate, that is strong Yidden, in order that we can share our values with others and be a blessing for our environment. If there was assimilation, if there wasn't strong education, we wouldn't exist. And this is something which people can understand. Indeed, our exclusivist approach is because we believe in inclusivity. We have a particular identity for the sake of our universal aspirations. And the finest example of this is the festival of Sukkot. Sukkah is the one mitzvah which you cannot hide. Every other mitzvah you can do on the quiet, in some way or another. For a sukkah to be kosher, it has to be exposed to the elements. It has to be visible. There is something I would love to, some research, maybe some of you could do it for us. You know, you have photos from outer space, Google Maps and all this. I would love during Sukkot to see all the Sukkot in London, to get pride, because we'll be able to know, you can have this community, how many Sukkot, you know, etc. This area, it'll be amazing. You cannot hide a Sukkah. Sukkot, therefore, is the one festival of Jewish pride. We announce to the world we're Jewish, we're different, and we're proud of it. However, during the times of the Beit Mikdash, 70 cows were brought as a sacrifice during the festival of Sukkot in decreasing order, in order that we should be mindful of the 70 nations of the world. Shivim Umot HaOlam, because we exist for all the nations. So one and the same festival highlights how exclusive we are, and at the same time, how we are here for everybody. And this is what Bilam was reminding of us of. En am levadad yishkon uvagoyim lo yitzchashav, amavdil ben koshlecho ben Yisrael la'amim. There needs to be a havdalah ben Yisrael la'amim, but it's because we are here for the sake of the Amim. And that is encapsulated in the pasuk, B'ni b'chori Yisrael, my firstborn child, O Israel. Parents don't love their firstborn children more than the others, but they give them tasks, and they say to the oldest child, you should know better. I want you to set a good example for the rest, right? Because you are taking on a quasi-parental role. Why is the firstborn child given that responsibility? It's because parents love all of their children. So it is with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are here as his chosen people because he loves every human being. And that's what Bilam reminds us of. So therefore, we are here, we put on talis and tefillin, we look different, we do different things, but that's because we are here for the sake of everybody whom we should reach out to cherish every human being created in the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So huge eshakar to you for this breakfast. Thank you for providing added entry points. Thank you for strengthening our Jewish identity and making us proud of what we are about. And it's all here because we're here for the sake of Hashem's whole earth. Have a good day.
thank you, Chief Rabbi, for taking the time. Chief Rabbi, we're very grateful to you and not only for all your care for us and for the Holy Night Synagogue. Thank you so much.
Everyone. Thank you again to the Chief Rabbi for joining us. Thanks everyone for coming this morning. The agenda and the timetable for future Breakfast and Learn will be published later in the week. So we'll see what the lineup is going forward. But unfortunately, we can't have the Chief Rabbi every week. Maybe another time in the future you can join us again.